Welcome to Roll to Save, the RPG history podcast. Mind's Eye Theatre.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Roll to Save. This is our Mind's Eye Theatre Roundtable episode. I'm joined as usual by my hosts Jason and Steve. How are you chaps?
Good, thank you. How's you?
I'm good, thanks very much.
Doing okay.
Excellent. And we've also got a special musical guest, Wes, who's been on numerous podcasts before. How are you doing, Wes?
Well, I think with that intro, I need to do something like la 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 la. Yes. No, I'm not musical in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, thanks for that.
You should actually come on one of my Paranoia actual plays. For some reason, they always end up singing. I don't know why, but every single game.
Paranoia the musical.
Yeah, people, they do. They end up singing, which is great. I love it. But I don't have to sing. That's
I would pay to watch Paranoia the musical. If
so would I.
did downstage, I would be down for that.
I would not. That would be blasphemy because, as we all know, musicals are the worst art form and deserve to be expunged.
You'd be bringing the art form up to a new level, previously unheard of levels.
Musicals are treason.
Yes, friend computer. I'll report for termination.
Exactly. That's how it goes. So, Jason, what games have you been playing recently in your reclusive Irish hideout? Have you been playing anything?
I've got multiple games of D&D 5th edition going on, so they're still ongoing. We just kind of swapped refs on one of the sessions. So I don't know if you remember Mo. She's from Mind's Eye Theatre when we were doing vampire stuff. So she's started to run her first ever D&D game. So that started on Thursday. So hopefully we won't reduce her to a crying wreck within a couple of weeks. But I'll try my best.
If you can keep your rules lawyering.
It's you just got to know what the rules are. That's all I'm asking,
Are you that guy that sits there and goes, actually, if you look at the rule book.
I think occasionally I have done that, yes. I'm not proud of it, but the amount of crap that gets, spewed about, oh yeah, this is the rules. No, it isn't. You clearly haven't read it since 1987. When somebody's playing 5th edition and quoting Thaco at me, do you know what I mean?
Good old Thaco.
Yeah, that would be me.
That would be you, yeah.
Yeah, it would be. I don't think I've seen the rules since, what did we say, 1987 or something. But funnily enough, there was what I'm like for like deals on things. So there was a starter. Yeah, tight, exactly. There was a starter edition D&D. That set that they do came up on offer for £10 the other day, and I was like, I don't even play D&D anymore, but I'm kind of tempted just to buy it.
That's a pretty good deal.
For a tenner? Why not?
Yeah, I know. Maybe I should.
Well, it's free as well on D&D Beyond at the moment until 31st of May. Ooh. You can get the Lost Minds of Fandelver, or whatever you pronounce it.
Acquisitions
Classic.
Incorporated as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a couple of good source books.
Yeah. So there you go. If you D&D Beyond, get on there before. I mean, if whether this airs before December, May the 31st, who knows? But we've been reliably informed that Jason has done all his tests of his mic, so there's no chance of him doing a Downey. We did actually, Jason, I meant to say, we got some feedback on email of someone who was saying that he loves. Just the fact that we seem very comfortable just kind of bantering with each other. And he loves the fact that Jason fulfills a Balderic role.
That's good to know. Normally it's things like that and how wonderful Steve is. That's generally the feedback.
I know Steve
always
gets like a lot of praise in
really?
their actual plays.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, people love you in the Slay Industries actual plays.
And we've no idea why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that American guy's really good.
I'm lost for words.
Yeah.
But the American thing is got to remember later on, Ian.
Anyway, Steve, what have you been playing recently?
That is a good question. I haven't Vampire has been my main roleplay. It's been so much fun to do we've been for folks who haven't been listening recently. We've been doing for the last 7 months. Ian, myself, and a few others have been doing an old school Masquerade revised tabletop campaign, and it's been amazing to run a game for that long, and my character is still alive somehow. Probably because he's the only sensible one in the group. But that's been a lot of fun. Other than that, a couple video games here and there. looking and buying games and not playing them. I think the last couple I bought were Dune and the Fallout RPG on drive-thru. Because I really want to play the Dune game. Oh, and Alien, of course. We've been doing Alien too, which has been amazing fun. Got to get back to
Alien has been a ton of fun for me to run, but also just seeing... I think it's one of the genius parts, actually, of the people who've put it together, that we've been running through the Destroyer of Worlds module and just seeing people realise that we're just going to play the characters from Aliens, and it works perfectly. Everyone, I'm pretty sure Jason at one point said, "You secure that shit," which was brilliant.
Pretty sure there were a couple of quotes made it out
Yeah.
there. It was pretty much straight from the script.
I'd be disappointed if there weren't, to be honest, Jason.
Exactly. Yeah, damn straight.
Well, the thing that impressed me most was that session where you all came up with a really sensible plan. So for those of you who never played it, there's a section in it where there's these insurgents holed up in a compound, and some of the team were very much for the, why don't we just take the APC, ram through the gates, and then tear our way through the building, beating them up. And that's kind of the presumption, I think, that the module has, that people are going to do that. And then you guys were like, can't we get a dropship?
We went 0 Dark 30 on it, really, didn't we? You were rappelling down and, going in from the roof.
It's great.
And, yeah, it's proper, it almost was a competent military plan.
It actually was competent, and I was quite impressed. My favourite bit was when you actually came out of the building and the two insurgents guarding the door, who were expecting you to come in through the gate, got a very nasty surprise when the squad bust out the door and gunned them all down.
And we still had the APC crash through the gates.
You did, and sadly you lost it. Next session,
You took it from us.
I didn't take it from you. I rolled well. Yeah, which is but the only thing I rolled well for. The rest of the invasion force were less than competent. You guys were like, these fellas are easy. They're not really terrible. They can't. But bunch of stormtroopers, they can't hit anything. No, it's just Iain rolling dice. So, Wes, you've not been playing any RPGs for a while, have you?
No, I'm like an estranged RPG player. I haven't touched an RPG for far too well since we did Pandemic, I guess. Really, I'm very curious about the Alien one. That sounds interesting. I know you've been bigging that up a lot, and big fan of the films and stuff. So yeah, that sounds interesting to me. My passions have moved on to video games and board games more often than not. Although board games since Jay you've left to go over to the Green Isle. The board games are on hold, and pandemics and stuff kind of get in the way of that. It's all everything's pandemics at the minute, whether it's role playing games or whether it's actual real life. So no, still very much video game related. Actually playing a game I would be curious to see done in role playing form. So I'm playing the Guardians of the Galaxy game at the minute, and it's very much in theme with the films, although the characters look a little bit different. Weird that they don't have the likenesses, but there's lots of comedy and banter between those characters, and I feel like, if you had 4 people playing that as an RPG, that could work really, really well. The missions could be crazy, and this group of people constantly failing and getting into problems and then working out ingenious ways of getting themselves out of it. Yeah, I think that would work really well as an RPG.
There's actually a Marvel RPG that was released as I don't know, it was an alpha or a beta, but they had a proper rulebook for, and my son got a copy of that. We've not yet looked at it. He went straight to the, how do I build some tanky Spider-Man type character in it, and it's getting pretty good write-ups from what I've seen from people who've done various playthroughs of it. So that could be perfect for running that sort of galactic heist type.
So bizarrely, the one I thought something like West End Games Star Wars system would work really well with that, or something as well. You'd have to figure out the alien races and things like that, but I think it's got the kind of that might have the kind of vibe that you're looking for, maybe.
Yeah, I've heard people talking about that West End Games version, and it does sound like it would be a good fit system-wise for that, yeah.
It's interesting, though, the kind of, it's an intergalactic heist type scenario. One thing, Steve, you brought to the vampire game, Steve's characters is essentially Danny Ocean from Ocean's 11, except he's undead. And I was talking to the players about what sort of goals they want, and the game really started off with Steve had a job for a member of the Primogen who wanted something stealing. And sadly, that all went very, very wrong due to the fact that our good friend Jason Seidel can't roll dice very well and ended up frenzying and killing normal people. It was quite funny. Every time he's left on his own, the poor guy just gets involved in some awful bloodshed because he'll roll badly. And we were playing it the other night, and Ryan, who plays with us, he just commented at one point, Jason just gets into such lovely adventures when he's on his own. One of the things Steve said he wanted his character to do was a heist of some description. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought RPGs are actually the perfect medium for that, where you have to plan out a heist, get as much information about your target as possible. And as a GM, it's a great exercise in writing a scenario, because you have to think, well, what effectively do they have to take care of in order to get to whatever it is that they're trying to steal. And it's weird that came out of a vampire game, but just the planning and the recruiting and getting the right people for the job, I think it's going to be a good experience, provided you don't roll badly, Steve, and end up frenzying and killing everyone.
Beats them becoming superheroes, though, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. We're very much not. It's not Vampians or superheroes with fangs, which is how tabletop vampire can often end up. It's devious people with fangs, right, Steve?
My character is like the worst, would be the worst superhero in the world, other than the fact that, you know, he's extremely persuasive, shall we say, to say the least. But he's terrible.
He is. I was very proud of you, Steve, when you were busy using mind powers on people, and then you decided just almost as a tail end, and that guy that's been on my back the entire day. Yeah, you guys need to really go and look into him. And before you know it, that he's in lots of trouble with the prince. Jason, you would hate Steve's character.
Probably. He'll be a Ventru, right?
Yes.
There you go. Well, yes, clearly.
But some of the most fun is just screwing with people who piss me off. It's great.
Yeah. We've all.
On that note,
I was going to say, hang on. I'm sitting amongst three Ventru here, from what I can remember of Mind's Eye Theatre, getting us back on topic a little bit.
Yeah. Well, see, that's a good starting point then. In Mind's Eye Theatre, we're probably largely going to talk about Vampire, because Vampire is, out of all the books, I'm actually looking at my bookshelf over there, and I've got 1, 2, 3.
For those who can't see, Iain is using his fingers.
I'm using my head to count as I go along. I've got 15 Mind's Eye Theatre books, and of those, about 6 of them are Vampire, which leads me to believe that apart from 2 of those, the rest weren't ever used, because the other ones, I think they just felt compelled to release a LARP version of them, because people are like, why doesn't our game get a LARP version?
Yeah.
And you're a bit like, but really, running Shifters of the East as a LARP, is that really going to be good?
Yeah, no one wants to be a fairy, right? Who wants to be a fairy in real life?
Oh, yeah, actually, you'd be surprised. When I was writing the podcast, I thought, I'm actually going to look up these things, because I'm going to be derogatory about The Shining Host, because it's just the people that played that. But it was really, really popular. Second to Vampire.
Really?
Yeah, there are tons of Changeling LARPs out there. And they've released a new edition of it, because there's been so much demand for it.
From you?
Not from me, no.
Wes?
Yeah, from Wes, obviously, clearly. Wes is going to put his cat ears and his stripy tights on.
Oh no, I'm getting flashbacks. From childhood at school and productions where I had to play the cat in Dick Whittington as a punishment. No, don't do it to me.
Did you have to play a cat in Dick Whittington?
As a punishment, because I mocked the kid who was actually the cat for having to wear a leotard. The teacher decided, well, there you go, Mr. Williams, you're going to wear it instead.
And his fashion choices have never looked back since.
That's right. Well, you remember
I've known you for 20 years and I never knew that.
Yeah, that was it. Punished for.
How did that not come up in like your best man speech or something?
My best man only went to secondary school with me, so he was probably unaware. I kept it from him
until now.
That's it. It's all out there now.
It's on a podcast now.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's on the internet.
So
Never goes away.
Wes has played a Shifters of the East Chronicle when he was at school, but for the rest of us, I think it's largely been Vampire. I've run Hunter before. Wes and Jason, you played in Hunter, but
Yep.
I think the majority of games that everyone here played were Vampire. And I suppose that'd be my question to you as a group. Why do you think that was the most popular one?
Well, I think the structure of it lends itself to it, I think. So, I mean, I back in 91, I think it was, when I first got like a first edition Vampire tabletop rulebook, nobody really, I don't think, I certainly didn't understand it, but when I started playing Mind's Eye Theatre, I kind of started to get to grips with the whole political aspect of it, and the whole point of Vampire in my mind is you've got social creatures that are driven by politics, and that lends itself, to my mind, to a good LARP game. What doesn't lend itself to a good Mind's Eye Theatre game is, picking up a truck and throwing it, or being a werewolf and ripping something asunder. I'm not trying to be derogatory at all, but to my mind, this, and there are even people who play political werewolf games and things like that. But the LARP thing lends itself to factions, politics, social interaction, and those are the three things I think the Vampire background had more of than any of the other ones.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, me too.
I think with any game that I've played that's been a Vampire Mind's Eye Theatre game, the political aspect was always number one. When the game really got bogged down was when there was some sort of combat.
Well, any kind of test.
Any kind of test, yeah. And I think that's,
combat, but
for those of you who've never played Mind's Eye Theatre, the test aspect of it, the system, and I use that in the loosest sense possible, basically involved people playing prolonged games of rock, paper, scissors with each other and then comparing traits. And when you actually read back, I went through the rule book when I wrote the history episode. When you actually read back how it was meant to be played, I don't think I ever played in a single LARP that used it as written, because the way it was written was so cumbersome. And you had to have these weird conversations where, like, well, I'm brawny enough to land this blow and hurt you. Well, I'm nimble enough to get out of the way. Oh, really? Well, I think you'll find that I am as much of a bruiser that needs to be. What the hell is this? And everyone just made a test. Went, I've got 10 physical traits. Oh, I've only got 8. Right, you get hit.
I think that's part of why the games that I played in worked so well for me, because I've never been one that knows the rules of RPGs like really, really minutely.
Like Jason.
So when the rules get out of the way, and it becomes more of a kind of almost like a free-form like drama, that's where it works better for me. And I could probably count on one hand the amount of times I actually made a challenge as my character in various games. And I think I'm probably the I would say somewhere in the middle is the happy medium. You want to make use of the tools at your character's disposal to achieve goals. I think you should do that. But you don't want to get bogged down, like you say, in loads and loads of rock, paper, scissors challenges all the time, because that just gets in the way of the actual kind of free-form drama of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's right. And I think when you're running the game, if you've been the storyteller, there's a certain burden on you to keep things moving. So, as an example, when Jason and I, and you joined us later on, Wes, as a storyteller and did a Sabbat game, one of the things we said near the beginning to ourselves was, if there's ever any combat involving the players and mortals, and assuming these mortals aren't like super trained SWAT guys or something, the rule we had was, okay, they win, and we move on. Because there's no point if they're like, oh, hey, we're going to go and rampage through that mall and cause a big masquerade breach for the Camarilla. We're not going to stand for all evening having them throw in rock, paper, scissors to see how many shoppers they manage to cut down. Instead, you say, right, fine, you've done this. There's dead people everywhere. How do you deal with the repercussions of your actions? That's
the thing, isn't it? Is you test for stuff that has repercussions. Okay,
yeah.
If it's if it doesn't matter that, you know, how many times you swang for that guy in the bar, it doesn't really matter. The fact is, you know, a vampire or a werewolf, for example, is not going to struggle too much with your average Joe. So why bother dragging it out? And I think about LARP as well is a lot more than tabletop. Is it's very much player versus player driven. So whereas, you know, in tabletop you're all in the same, well, maybe not your tabletop, Ian, but in most people's tabletop, you know, when you're all part of the same party and are all friends, or coterie, I think was the correct term in Vampire, when you're all part of the, you know, then, you know, you work together to try and sort something out. Whereas in, you know, my experience a lot was it was very much player versus player. You know, you picked a Ventry that you hated and you made his life hell, didn't I, Wes? And that was what made it good fun.
It was. I recall one particular game where, and I think it was a lot of crossed wires from the refs. Myself and Jason and Wes used to play in the LARP where there were two storytellers who, for some reason, were at odds with each other, which led to inconsistencies at times, is probably the nicest way to put it. And I originally was a storyteller on that, and for various reasons decided I didn't want to be involved with it anymore, namely these two fighting with each other. But when I came back as a player, I looked for a particular piece of information, and one of the storytellers gave it to me, which seemed to completely contradict everything that had been going along for that particular plot line. And I just remember trying to curry favour with Jason, who was the prince at the time, and giving him this piece of information. And then you went and offed our friend Ali's character, which is the wonderful player versus player aspect.
But it was perfectly logical, the reasoning, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, basically the last vestige of this, basically this plague on vampirism, was in her character, and she would spread it by biting and feeding and so forth. So, you know, like any good surgeon, you know, you remove the disease. So yeah, like any good vampire, I didn't get my hands dirty, which was great. I just used my fire and forget. So Jason. Sorry, Ali.
I doubt she listens. Yeah. So how did you guys all get involved with Mind's Eye Theatre? Jason, I think we talked about yours before because you were probably very similar to myself. But Steve, what about you?
So I only ever did about one game, and it was in college. I went to a fairly large university that had a pretty popular RP scene, and between all the different RP games, there was hey, we want to do a LARP, and it happened to be Vampire with Mind's Eye Theatre. And so we're talking like mid to late 90s at this point, with a bunch of folks, and I had no experience with it. I'm not exactly what you'd call the most extroverted person in the world, so and acting is not my thing, but it was a stretch for me, and it kind of took over my life for a little while there.
He can do that.
I remember vividly, I had a summer job and we were playing over the summer. I remember vividly taking phone calls from people in character while on lunch break at this summer job I had, and dealing with that. And I think my character eventually got off for doing something stupid, but I think it was a venture. But it still vividly sticks in my mind as something that was really memorable. And I met with the people I knew really well, and it involved a lot of trust and involved a lot of stretching myself as a role player and put myself out there, because there is an additional burden of like, well, when you're around a table, you got 4 people, you're all friends, and there's no like social pressure. It's not like, you know, you're not trying to tell like a really elaborate story necessarily within the PCs all the time. You know, you're just there to goof off and have fun. Whereas you've got a group of like 20, 30 people, and you kind of want to put on a good show. So there was a lot of burden and pressure as a player, but I kind of stepped up to it and had a lot of fun, and it was very rewarding for that. And I wish I'd been able to do more. Like, honestly, I think it's mostly, if I hadn't moved to the States and had to rebuild kind of like my whole circle, I think I probably would have done a lot more of it. But yeah, it is what it is. Nostalgia for me, I think.
It's true what you say about the aspect of it almost dominating your social scene. I was laughing when you said about doing these in-character conversations. I'm pretty sure Jason and I have been in a pub before
Oh yeah,
for a
several
drink, and then
times.
having in-character conversations, which if other people were listening, like, oh, why haven't they called the police yet? Why are these two people talking about driving a flaming van into somebody's front of somebody's haven, whatever that is? But it really did. I know myself, Jason and Wes, we were involved in our local LARP scene probably for a good 5+ years.
Oh yeah.
And it did come to almost dominate your social life as well as your gaming life. I didn't play any other RPGs while we were running or playing in Vampire LARPs. And I recall that for a couple of our LARPs, we used to have a meet-up on like a Wednesday night or a Monday night, I can't remember which day of the week it was, down at a local pub where people would discuss what they were going to do in downtime. And then as soon as both Jason and I put together a forum for our respective games, and the amount of just non-stop chatter on these forums of people of, I'm going to do this. And then, of course, when you're running the game, your inbox is insane. I'm pretty sure in my job now I manage less email than I did when I used to run a Vampire LARP, because there's people like, oh, would my character be able to do this? Yeah. Well, what about this? And people like feeling out what they can get away with without like burning themselves down in the process. And it was kind of just all encompassing.
Yeah, 100%. And the game in question, I think, working in IT as well and having access to that forum kind of 24/7 throughout your work day and stuff definitely becomes a massive distraction. Even more so when you help one of the GMs get a job at the place where you work. and then it just becomes like, it goes to a whole nother level. And your discussions are dominated by it at work and then outside of work and online. And yeah, it was crazy, absolutely crazy. Fantastic memories, and obviously I've got some fantastic friends, some not so fantastic. I'm looking at you, Jake.
Well,
no, I'm joking.
That's true.
Some great friends out of it. And you're right, it dominated absolutely everything. And it was the only RPG I played. I got into it. Bizarre. Well, yeah, it was a weird thing. So I was playing a variety of RPGs before I went off to university with a group locally in where I lived in Doncaster. Went off to university, didn't do much at uni, but was aware of a Vampire LARP group at uni. And the only thing I'd heard about it wasn't a particularly positive thing. It was like people running around the streets doing stuff. And I was like, I was kind of intrigued, but kind of like, I don't think I want to get involved in that. Although the fact they all hung out at some abandoned church did sound kind of cool. But left uni, moved down to Milton Keynes, and obviously completely new here, no friends or anything. So I was like, maybe I should get into an RPG group, and I did that locally by just posting on a local forum. And someone said, yeah, I run some games, why don't you pop along? And this was a friend of ours who, I can't remember where he lived in Milton Keynes now. But there were myself, another guy from work, went round, met a couple of guys there, and they were all doing tabletop stuff, but also they were involved in this Vampire LARP. And one of the GMs was there, and he was like, oh, you should come along. And I was like, kind of got these memories of what Vampire LARP was like at uni. And he was like, no, it happens in this pub or this pub, and it's fine. I was like, all right, well, come along. And I was very, very like, this is going to be terrible. I'm not expecting this to be a good experience, but I'm going to go. And my mate Andy was going to go as well. So yeah, we went along, and just from the first session, it completely grabbed me. The whole Elysium concept, the idea of these vampires meeting to plan out the things that they're doing, the fact that it wasn't running around the streets, with foam weapons, twatting each other. It was very political. It was very drama focused. Yeah, and it was just a blast, and it hooked me from then on. Had a great time with it.
It's interesting we say about running around the streets. You'll probably remember this, Wes, that White Wolf used to have forums for the various games. And there was a huge discussion, it's around about year 2000, 2001, of somebody who was peddling what he called immersive LARP. And the idea was that you went somewhere public, like a nightclub or a bar, and you played it there. And with the concept of the masquerade in Vampire, where you're not allowed to reveal yourself to mortals, it meant that you couldn't be using your powers, and therefore there wouldn't be any need for tests. And this guy would argue till he's blue in his face that this was like the purest form of LARP. And it was so his hill to die on that he ended up saying, I'll share some photographs and you can all see how amazing this experience is. And he eventually shared these photographs. And if you can imagine we used to play in a pub in Milton Keynes, which isn't exactly the most riveting scene. Above a pub, yeah, exactly. She's shunted off in the freaks room above a pub.
It was a function room, of course,
But imagine a really cool nightclub in somewhere like, I think it was Atlanta. The sort of nightclub that when you see a film and like a bad guy has a nightclub, this looks like a bad guy's nightclub, which looks really cool. But then there's just this awkward looking collection of people in black trench coats standing awkwardly posing for a photo at the bar. Like, it's not really an immersive experience, is it? It's like, oh look, it's goth night in the cool nightclub, except you're the only goths there.
But that happened because we'd have a timeout interval midway through the night, and everybody would go down to the pub, or throughout the night go down to the pub and pick up a pint and have a pint of beer or whatever. And yeah, there was quite a lot of obviously goth influence on the clothing. Some of us went a little bit further and had really dodgy contact lenses and all that kind of stuff as well. So yeah, there was probably a few words said about us at the time.
But that was the thing I used to hate, was when you got these people who almost relished we could go and freak out normal people. Like, don't do that. Because A, they're not going to be freaked out. They're just going to, the sad fools dressed like extras from The Crow. But also, it's kind of disrespectful and gets everyone else tarred with the same brush.
That's a concern when you've got some characters turning up with replica firearms.
Yeah.
And you think, and then they maybe go out to grab some food or something and they take the replica firearms with them and you think, maybe guys, maybe don't bring those.
Yeah, especially in the UK with getting up with an armed response unit turning up. That's not a good thing.
Well, that happened once, I remember, at the game we played in, with two characters turned up with fairly realistic little firearms, and I had a somewhat stern conversation with them and was dad and said, you put these away and never bring them along again. Mainly because I think at that point my father was the commander of an armed response unit and I know what would happen. And they were like, oh yeah, but we wanted to bring them along. Like, you're in Elysium.
Yeah,
one of the rules is no weapons.
Well, no violence. Yeah, and what about the masquerade? You go running around. You're supposed to be unobtrusive. You're not waging some guerrilla. Well, you are winning a guerrilla war, maybe, but it's a really covert.
Only you were ever waging a guerrilla war. Everybody else just wanted to get along, and
really,
you were just angry the whole time.
That bit I'm not arguing with.
I don't know. I think a certain person called Pete we could throw into the.
Pete was.
He was angry. Yeah. He was angry too. Yeah, Me and him were very angry people at that point in time.
Yeah, you were. I did love watching your character because you were almost like a deranged conspiracy theorist, that any time one of your plans went wrong, you're like, it's the Ventrue. One of the Ventrue did that.
Always the Ventrue.
Yeah, boss, it was the Ventrue. They did that, just feeding your crazy paranoia.
The only thing is, I should have blamed the Tremere usually, and I never did. And if I'd realised the Ventrue were less, I gave the Ventrue far too much credit. Is basically what I did. I assumed they were far more competent than I thought they were.
Well, when I played the Tremere, I actually did orchestrate something that was slightly against your interests, and we planted evidence that it was one of the. That kid that used to play Ventrue, the one that I shouted at one game really loudly, and he got traumatized by. I planted evidence it was him that did it, and I recall you absolutely going to town on this kid for whatever infraction it was.
Entirely in game within the rules. There was no, let's just. That.
Yeah. Jason never actually went around people's houses and bullied them. This is in character, okay?
Yeah. Probably because I'd get my lights punched out. To be fair.
That does bring up a good point about LARP, though. And it touches on what we mentioned earlier about the rock, paper, scissors and the tests and stuff. the one area where things kind of fall down a little bit is if you're not that socially confident, being able to play that kind of character and not having to lean on the rules. And because the rules are there to help you in those situations where, you maybe you can't stretch yourself to be the character that you want to be. Toreador, for example, to be a flamboyant person, it kind of makes me think that in some ways for a LARP like this, you kind of almost have to be ever so slightly able to do this. Like, don't play a Toreador if you are a complete social introvert, and those kind of things,
Well, Jason, you remember a discussion we had, because we hit upon this issue in the Sabbat LARP that we ran, where there was one of our players who came to us, he'd lost his character, and he came to us with a concept that was some, incredibly social, slick, former MI6 interrogator or something. It was something along those lines, with oodles of social traits. And the sort of tagline was, I'll just use my social traits to almost compensate for the fact that I can't play this character. And the guy who wanted to play, nice guy, really faithful player, he was always there in games, and he had a great time playing. But we had I can't even remember what the solution we came to was, but you and I debated it kind of long and weary, because we're like, should we let him play this? Because there's loads of players there who they will play out the social traits and make a really good effort to do it. And some people who even aren't that social and put themselves in an uncomfortable position playing that. So do we really just let this guy walk up and go, okay, I'm going to intimidate you, let's have a challenge, rather than role-playing it? But then the flip side is, well, we don't do that with physical stuff. With physical stuff, we never say, okay, well, you punch the other guy and see if you hurt him. You do rock, paper, scissors. And it was a real conundrum. I found it personally when I played, I would always deliberately give my character a lot of physical traits because of my in-game physical presence, because regardless of whether I had 3 physical traits or 12 physical traits, people would respond to me as if I had a lot. And therefore it would
6'4" Glaswegian?
Yeah, it would be cheating if I was to have, I've actually only got 3 physical traits and I've got the puny negative trait, because people would consciously, I'm not going to go fight him, he's massive. So you've kind of got it on both sides, and I don't think we ever came to a satisfactory solution.
And you've got the opposite problem as well, and we won't go into too much detail about people who are quite good at being social and quite good at being motivating and all this kind of stuff, who'll just put the lowest stat in their charisma or their social traits in this instance, and then deliver a stirring speech to their packmates who think that they're the best leader since,
Spartacus.
And I'm Spartacus, and so is my wife, because this guy is their pinnacle of a leader, but he's got 3 social traits and 2 negative social traits, for example. So it works both ways, and it's difficult.
Well, we talked about that before. That was a kind of egregious example of it, where I think the reason we intervened was this guy knew what he was doing, and he wanted to max his character out in other areas, and he actually said, I'll just roleplay the social stuff. And he had 3 social traits, which is the lowest you can get in Vampire, 2 negative social traits that made him a complete dolt. And then he delivered this huge speech. And going back to what you said about consequences, the whole point of the speech was to rile everyone up against one of the other players in the game. And we were forced to call a timeout and say, okay, everyone, that may have sounded great. However, he delivered it this way: 3 social traits, 2 negative traits. It probably came out as just jibber jabber, and you need to kind of disregard it. And then we had a word with him afterwards of, please don't do that again.
And I had something similar. Oh, kind of similar happened to me. Not the opposite side maybe happened to me when I was a national UK Vampire Society game, and I'd spent this time chatting with this guy and this lady and talking, and I kind of posited this idea, and it was a bit out there, and this was in the new Requiem setting actually as well anyway, and I said, look, and just to let you know before I finish, I've got this many social traits, I've got this talent, this thing. And the guy turned around and went, oh, cheesy social challenge. And I was like, well, first of all, I'm not making you make a challenge. Secondly, I'm just telling you that my character is either very persuasive or, actually it was very persuasive. you take that how you want to take it. I'm not making you make a challenge, but it's making them aware of what the kind of situation is with your character. Because, you know, I don't mind speaking in public. I don't mind giving a bit of a rousing speech, but I'm never going to motivate nations. Do you know what I mean? Whereas some people can, and you listen to them, and some people come up with stupid ideas, and yet they've got the ability to convey it in a way that motivates everybody, and that's how you get dictatorships.
I can't remember if we ever did this or not, but just an idea that pops into my head, and I've got some vague memory or notion that we did, but I'm not sure. It almost feels like what Jason's just described is the kind of thing that you almost need on a badge, right? So that when you walk... No, seriously, when you walk up to someone, they know this character's persuasive, right? And you take that as you will. Like, don't worry about a test. If you want to react to it and role play it as if they're more persuasive than they are coming across, then do it. And if you don't want to, then don't.
I don't think that's a terrible idea. I mean, we did do in the LARP games. We did badges of a sort for status and things like that. So it was status. So you would walk in and you'd have all your status displayed. It's almost like you'd walk in with like a medal row across your chest, and people would then treat you according to how many dots you had or ribbons that you had on your chest, and that worked, I think, to an extent. And I think you're right, some non-verbal cue, because me having to take a guy aside and say, oh, and this is it breaks the immersion, it breaks everything, whereas just having a little thing on your chest that they can look at and go, oh yeah, he's the boss, or no, he's scum, I'm not listening to this guy, makes it a lot easier, and it's done in game then. With
First Ed, in The Masquerade, when that was released, for various powers that would influence you, they had a whole swathe of hand gestures, and I think like a couple of those survived to not that hand gesture, Wes.
Oh, there's a few characters that would have got that one.
For the evidence of the tape, Wes is making a hand gesture that is considered rude in some countries. But yeah, there was a whole ton of them, and they get rid of them because it was just ridiculous. It was like having to learn sign language before you could possibly play in a LARP. But I know there was certain ones for some presence powers that you would, I think, hold your hands out at your side to show that you were using awe or majesty or something, which meant people had to...
not jazz hands, Wes.
Yeah, Wes, not jazz hands. I don't think we ever did it with anything else, but we did do it with status, and that worked quite well. I think every Vampire LARP I ever played in, you'd end up with like a sticker with a number on it or whatever to say this person has, status 6 and you've got status 1, so therefore you should be respecting them. And it was quite a nice little non-verbal cue.
So as storytellers, obviously, from the player perspective, it's one side, but as storytellers, in the tabletop, obviously, you've got a storyteller to be able to arbitrate that kind of situation, either with dice rolls or otherwise, or providing context about why someone would or would not know or believe this thing, right? Have you ever had to deal with players who just like, well, I don't care how persuasive you are, what powers you use, I just don't want this, it's negative to my players, so I'm just not going to go with it.
There were some cases, but not as many as you'd think. And I think if you were properly into the setting, like I think it was the third game I played in with Jason, and I was kind of been Jason's right-hand man, and we were going around and harassing Ventru. And one of the Ventru characters who we both hated, she used entrancement on me, which was like, oh, you basically have to do what she says, and you'll take her side in arguments. And to me, I was like, that's an amazing opportunity. So Jason's losing his rag with me. He's like, why the hell are you agreeing with her? I'm like, she's making some really good points, don't you think? And he gave some like really great moments. I can recall, though, most people, if you played that, this sort of stuff would happen. I recall in the Sabbat lap that I ran once, there was one player who took massive issue to the fact that she'd failed the dominate challenge against someone else. And she's like, I'm not doing that. My character wouldn't do that. And you're like, your character would. He's literally used the power of his mind to make you go and say that thing. And she ended up leaving the game. But that wasn't a great loss. But probably a handful of times where people have, usually because it conveys some sort of disadvantage on them. But I think in the whole, most players, if there was no GM there, they actually arbitrated stuff between themselves pretty well, because I think they were there for the experience rather than for the, I'm going to win against this guy.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think there's so few occurrences of that. It's almost like you need to be a masochist to play this game. So having stuff go against you and failing is actually probably one of the more important parts and more enjoyable parts of the game.
Yeah,
it's a bit weird because obviously in D&D or something like that, you can't. And don't get me wrong, I personally think those things are great there as well. But there are people that view it as just a competition, and it's you've got to win, and if anything goes against them, they don't like it. But I don't know whether we were blessed with particularly good or, good players who took that in their stride pretty well.
Yeah, I think it's something you saw when you were a storyteller was a lot of you got to do a lot more of the admin, if you like, of keeping the game moving. They always talk in Mind's Eye Theatre, you get storytellers and narrators are generally the people who would play NPCs. And storytellers were the ones who would, let's say, do the admin for the game. And I do recall one game where, again, it was this self-same Sabbat LARP, where there was one character who made a literal deal with the devil. It was a plot line where one of the other characters had unearthed some demonic thing, and she got wind of it and got involved with this demon, and then made a pact to essentially get cool powers. And the thing is, when you're running a plot like that, it's pretty obvious where the source of this power is coming from. When this creature from the pit is like, and all you need to do is promise me your soul. How does that sound? Oh, cool. Yeah, give me all these dots and a discipline. It ended up, there was another character that played an Inquisitor. And for those of you not aware, in the Sabbat, in the vampire setting, the Inquisition exists within the Sabbat to root out infernalists. And she got a bit free and easy with this power, and the Inquisitor eventually tracked her down, another player, and destroyed her. And she came and had a massive go at me afterwards, going, I didn't realise that would be the consequence for this. To which I was like, really? You know the setting, you know what exists, you know you made a pact with a demon. Oh, I didn't know it was a demon. Yes, you did. And the good thing was she had this big old rant at me, and I'm not going to make another character because I'm not coming back to this game because, you railroaded me into getting killed. And she did come back later on that evening and said, I'm really sorry, that was an overreaction. I've got this great idea for a new character, which was always something you liked to hear from players who'd lost a character, was the phrase, I've got a good idea for a new character, because it meant, much like Jason said, that masochistic piece of, I've suffered horribly, I've lost this character, I'd like to play something else.
That was great fun, let me do it again.
Yeah.
in fact, here's some ways I can make it even more masochistic.
That's the hardest bit, though, right? When it comes to tabletop characters, losing a character can be hard. But when it comes to LARP, and I think particularly something like Vampire LARP as opposed to any kind of fantasy thing that you might be doing with the rubber weapons, I think losing a character can be extremely hard to take, particularly if it's not well managed by the GMs and not, you're not looked after, or the players aren't considerate to that as well. I mean, I'm sure there were instances, and I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I'm convinced there were instances where, someone would turn up with a new character and maybe within 2 games they might have been killed by someone who was just effectively abusing their own power and not being particularly considerate. And because I think there is some degree of that you need to apply, because there's a lot of investment in creating new characters, and there's a lot of investment of time when you're playing characters for a long period of time. And so you don't want to see them just get cast aside off something too easily. And I'm sure with that particular instance you talked about there, Iain, there was a lot of agonising over, even though this person is going down that path, are there other ways we can deal with it? Can we stretch it out? Can we make this a longer journey? Because you want it to feel worthwhile. Like when anybody dies, regardless of how they've died, you want it to feel that the journey getting to that point was worthwhile. The story that you told, regardless of the negative consequences that ultimately befell your character, it was a great story.
Right. And this particular instance, that's more or less exactly what happened. So as soon as this Inquisitor turned up, in this player's downtime, she's getting things like a demonic patron coming and saying, hey, you need to cool it with the powers here. This guy's sniffing around and he'll be gunning for you. And, if I lose you, that's going to be bad. So, and he's trying to protect her from what happened, but he can only interfere to a certain degree because he doesn't want to put himself at risk. And yeah, just carried on. And the thing I always said was, I'm not going to ever put hand anything to the player who's playing the Inquisitor. He's going to have to do his detective work to work it out. And he did. He was on it like Sherlock Holmes. He was all over that, and he followed the clues, eventually found this other character, and that was that. And he agonised actually over the decision to kill the other character. But he came to the conclusion, I wouldn't do anything else but that. And that was quite a mature response on his part. But I think you're right. It's with LARP, I think because you're physically playing that character, there's more of an investment in, especially if you've been doing it for a long time, there's more of an investment. And I know, Jason, you and I have had some people be somewhat histrionic before when they've lost their characters. But usually if they can get back on the horse, it's fine.
It is weird. It does elicit quite an emotive reaction. I think more so, as you say, than tabletop. I don't know whether part of that is the fact that in general, if you die in tabletop, then you make a character and he comes in at the same level as everybody else, and he starts again at the same power level. Whereas in LARP, that doesn't happen. You generally end up at the bottom of the heap again. So whether that's got something to do with it, I don't know. But there's, to the point in tabletop, you've probably just looted the body and you end up with the same magic items the guy had before as well. But
don't judge everyone by your standards.
No. But in Vampire, you generally end up at the bottom of the heap, and there's also a lot of separation you've got to maintain as well. Is what did your previous character know that now you can't know, right? Or you can't react upon? Yeah, you may know that woman is an infernalist because she sacrificed you to her dark deity, but you can't go then to the Inquisitor and give him a hand finding it, because that's, there's more ramifications to it than that.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think is a really important point to touch on, because it is very, very hard, particularly if you rush straight back into it with a new character, to push that stuff aside. And for a lot of times, it's not that you're intentionally trying to use that information, but it's there, and sometimes you're just not thinking. These things, and it's hard to react. It's a real challenge.
I had that when I came back in one of the LARPs we played in, from being a storyteller to being a player character, and the amount of memory boxing that I had to go through to ensure that I wouldn't act on things that I knew. I deliberately kept my character separate from a lot of the main plot lines, because it would seem, if I suddenly came along with a solution for everything, it'd be like, oh, well, Iain used to be an ST and now he's player of the year because he solved all these problems. And that was tricky. And we didn't have, to my mind anyway, the games that we ran, we didn't have that much of a problem with that. We had a big sticky post on one of our forums that was metagaming, what you shouldn't do. But not many people came into it with that attitude. There was a couple of people who I recall having to have a word with of, hey, hang on, your previous character knew that, you didn't, so can it?
But whether it was deliberate or accidental is hard
exactly
to say sometimes. I mean, keeping that separation can be difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, again, whether we were just blessed with good players, I don't know, or whether we got lucky.
Well, what were you guys' fondest memories of LARP?
Anything targeting a Ventru generally is what I would go with.
Give us a specific targeting of Ventru. I can think of one instance that you were very pleased with.
Really? I don't know.
When you annihilated the leadership in one night.
Well, yeah, but that's see, you're making me out to be like this, psychopath who goes around killing other characters.
Were you not a psychopath that went around killing other characters on that particular occasion?
On that particular occasion, yeah. Yeah, well, the refs came to me and said, I talked to them about doing a storyline chronicling the fall from humanity to the beast, and that's what I wanted to do. And you get violent towards the end. That's kind of the way it is, especially when you're an extremely powerful, very angry bourgeois. So, yeah, that was good. Role playing wise, there was so many instances. I mean, I think the one that springs to mind is just, friend of ours, Anna, was playing one of your Tremere at one point, and we were having all these problems with this blood plague, as I may have mentioned, and which I think was one of the refs' favourite kind of plot devices. And I think I'd failed my feeding test that night, so you've got this really powerful on the route to the beast, angry Brujar with no blood, just to kind of make it really happy. And then I think Anna walked in and I'd offered her a position on like keeper, I think maybe, or something, and she came in to turn it down, but she succeeded on her feeding test, so she walked in with the blush of health, and said, no, I can't do what you're asking me to do. And the scene where I'm basically stalking around her, like that sticks in the mind as quite a potent little piece. I don't know whether she felt the same at the time, but it was kind of like, but even just things like picking Wes up and giving him a lift to the game and playing Disturbed tracks at really, really loud volume while driving far too fast. I think it's that's particularly fond memories. I do enjoy that.
I like the way you refer to them as my Tremere.
Because they were your Tremere.
They were not my Tremere. They were my colleagues.
Yeah, right.
And let me just say that playing Disturbed at rather high volumes while driving really fast might be the perfect warm-up act for a Brujar, but for a Rentru, it's not getting me in the right headspace.
I had a couple of Red Bulls beforehand as well, so I was probably wired by the time I got to a game. Don't do this at home, kids. It's not a good idea. Oh, it was just, I look back on it, it's like...
Wow, Jay's had half a bottle of Jack. Good job, Jay.
No.
So aside from dangerous driving and dangerously slaughtering other players, Jason, do you have any other memories?
Do you remember when you ran that one-off game for me when I was the Archbishop in the Sabbat? Now, I don't know if there was a bloodbath thing.
I ran it for all the players, not just for me.
It was just for me. But no. But there was that. There was a game where it was a game just after we'd done the bloodbath, and I don't know whether that's when I decided that I was Cardinal of Western Europe or something equally egocentric or something.
There was some sort of vanity trip.
It was definitely a vanity trip. Okay, so, and then we did the bloodbath, and then the following month, I think, we all turned up, and you said we're doing a one-off game, and we've done a few of these before, so I was like, oh, this is really cool. And you gave me this character sheet of this thin-blooded, God knows, 13th or even worse generation Malkavian, who basically thought he was the Archbishop of the Sabbat. And then you told everybody else. So basically, you gave them almost like advanced sort of, was it like futuristic versions of themselves looking back in, and they got to basically tell me how I wasn't the Archbishop of the Sabbat, who the hell did I think I was, and all that kind of stuff. And that was very cool because that messed with my head a lot. And it's
the thing that I loved about that game. So for readers, listeners even who aren't familiar, see, this is what happens when you write blog articles. You start crossing the streams. But for listeners who aren't familiar with the Sabbat mythos, the bloodbath is an honorary thing that the Sabbat do for their higher-ups that bestows some sort of advantages. They basically bathe in blood. But a big aspect of that is it has hallucinogenic effects, some of which include seeing the future.
Yeah, but nobody ever remembers that bit. All they remember is, oh yeah, you contribute some blood, you dunk the guy in it, it's all good. It's like a perverted baptism kind of thing, isn't it?
It is.
But even I know my Sabbat rituals all right, but even I kind of forgot all about that as well. So that was very cool.
Yeah, I don't forget the hallucinatory past. Any excuse to do a prophecy game, because I always find that it's a lot better to play out what could happen as a flash forward than it is to just write on someone's sheet, oh yeah, you get a vision of the future and these things could happen. Much better to let the players make the decisions. Yeah,
and absolutely. And then when it does come off, how cool do you look for like foreshadowing it, or it's fantastic. So anyway, yeah, that was definitely up there.
That's that classic GM trick of when you've written out something and then the players come up with a solution to a problem, and it's way better than whatever you've scribbled down in your notes,
that's
and
it.
You just go with it, and they're like, oh my god, Iain is such a genius to have come up with this. Like, yeah, planned it all that way from the start.
Absolutely.
Not hasty scribbling through in my notes. What about you, Wesley?
I can't call on specific events, but I do feel that after doing the Ventru character for so long and then moving over to the Sabbat game and then Hunter, where I tried to do things that kind of pushed me a bit more a dramatic side, because I was, I've always had an interest in that side of things. And so, playing a character who was mute effectively was super interesting, and playing with different players in that as well. So Dan and Gareth and the like, doing that was super interesting. Enjoyed that. And then Hunter was very much the high point for me of everything we did LARP wise. Brilliant group of players, really putting themselves out there, playing characters with so many emotional challenges and stuff going on. It was just really raw and emotional, and brilliant experience. Nothing to do with the GM, absolutely nothing to do with the GM. But
personally, he was the best.
Just great times, and like Jay said, even the things that outside of the game, like the drives to the game, or just remember when we were playing in Stony Stratford at York House, taking a break in the middle and going for some nice chicken fried rice at the local Chinese restaurant, and just sitting down and having a chat with everyone, and just meeting all those new. I absolutely just started tipping it down here. Sorry for the distraction, but if there's noise on my mic, it's because it's hailstones. The heavens have opened, brilliant sunshine and hailstones. That's British weather for you. So just meeting all those great people, making brilliant friends, and the dramatic challenges that got increasingly more challenging with the different games that we played in.
Yeah, I think that Hunter game that you mentioned, the quality of the role play from people there actually blew me away. I started running that LARP because I really liked the Hunter the Reckoning setting, and I thought, how could you do that as a social LARP? Because when you play Hunter as a tabletop, it's like a detective game. There's a lot of very interesting humanity-based discussions of, are we doing the right thing? And the different viewpoints that different people have are what contributes to that. So I thought that could work well as a social thing, where you have these people drawn together trying to figure out what the hell is happening and what can we do next. And at the risk of embarrassing you, Wes, you were exceptional in that game. There was Wesley's particular character started off as this, essentially the teacher that everyone bullies at school. And when he got this calling, decided that he was the ultimate badass, and he would turn up at these meetings acting like, your trench coat wearing king of Reddit that was there to be dark and moody, but who actually internally was completely conflicted because he had no idea what was going on. In fact, I think the first time you killed something in the game, you were like, oh shit, we just murdered someone. And you had a really good scene with one of the other players where you were both like, we have no idea what to do. And he's like, I thought you were some badass who was used to doing this. And you're like, I've never done this before. But there was a moment where in Hunter, as your character goes through the journey and you become more powerful, you actually start losing your mind. And your character went away to almost find himself. And you took the character out of the game for a few months, and you came back for one game having achieved the sort of pinnacle power level that your character could achieve. And you never used it. But you had an amazing scene where you reunited with one of the other players whose character had genuinely missed you for the time that you'd been away, and you were essentially his emotional crutch while he was away, and he'd completely gone off the rails while you weren't there. And it's the most emotion I've ever seen in a LARP game, and it was a genuinely wonderful scene. And then both of you screwed everything up and the game ended. But it was I hadn't actually planned to end the game on that game, but it was so perfectly done that I was like, well, you guys have done irreparable damage to the world. I guess it's ending. But that was, for me, a high point in people's ability to roleplay. The game wasn't as political as anything else, but just the personal stories that each one of those characters had was way more than I'd expected would be born out of it.
Yeah, it was a complete blast. Yeah, really, really great. And that has brought some memories flooding back as well. I can always rely on your brain, Iain, to remember everything that my brain fails to.
There was one moment I loved where we had a little kind of Easter egg nod to one of the players who you tracked these vampires down, and it was essentially a Sabbat pack from our previous Sabat LARP, and people were really dithering what to do because they previously, I think about half a dozen of them had a fight with a bunch of vampire ghouls and got completely owned by them. And they were like, what are we going to do with these vampires? And I still remember you had the power that was you could be covered in flames and you wouldn't burn. And they get out this van near this vampire's haven, it's still middle of the day. And you said, guys, I've got it, I'm going to go in on my own. And Wesley's guy just starts taking his clothes off and he's got this big tank of petrol in the back of the car. And I think it was Tracy's like, what's going on here? And Wes goes, just pouring the petrol over himself, pulls out a lighter. He's like, you're about to see some seriously fucking scared vampires. And then just walks into this building and sets himself alight. And I think they were like, has he lost it? Is he just killing himself for the greater... Because it was after that you disappeared. I remember that was after that moment your character then went off to find himself. And they all assumed you died in that fire. But that was a really cool moment.
And there was me, blamed it all on Tom.
What about you, Steve? Have you got any fond memories?
Gosh, I mean, kind of echoing some of Wes's comments, like the people, the stories, the emotions are really what I recall, as well as being in a bunch of different locations rather than being around the same table every week. Actually physically playing, and not even just in a pub, like being outside, like going to places where we'd have gatherings and things like that. That all sticks out of me. All those things. I can't even remember what happened other than when my character got killed. It was outside it. I think it was at the side of Arthur's seat is where my character got killed. And tried to pull some shenanigans with presents to get out of it and failed miserably. Tried to use majesty on a bunch of vampire and
was Jason playing in that game?
Oi.
So yeah, those are the things that bring it back to me. Not any very specific moments, just the memories, the emotions, and just the feelings about that it was something special, and that I would love to participate in something like that again. I don't know if I'm maybe not too old, but I don't know if I'm at a place in my life where I'd want to do it again, but I definitely wish I had done more of it, I will say.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to run a vampire LARP in a retirement home when I'm over 70. I'm just going to get... That's going to be where all the vampires get together when aging. Do you have... Are there characters that... or are you still in touch with the people that you played with?
Me personally, not really, because it was a bunch of folks I knew from uni. Maybe one over the time. Like, it was a separate group of folks I went to who were in the role-playing society as well as some of their friends. So I didn't really keep in touch with a lot of them after I left uni, which is unfortunate. But yeah, it's interesting to go back to Edinburgh and see those sites and think about that type of stuff as well. Always floods back memories, for sure.
Yeah, location's a biggie. Jason said before that we played in various pubs in the area of the city of Milton Keynes, no less now. Milton Keynes is now officially a city.
Yeah.
But I was always kind of spoiled because I played at university and I went to the University of Glasgow, which is this... if you've not seen it, Google it. It looks a bit like Hogwarts, but it's this incredible old Gothic building, and we used to play in the old building. So going from the sort of emotions that conjures up to playing above a pub in Milton Keynes, it's slightly different. You're like, oh, is this
much less pretentious.
Poloi vampires live in the southeast? This is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's difficult because even I would say it was great when we moved to York House because of the space we got, but then the interior of York House it doesn't exactly inspire.
So
I would say
York House is a community centre, basically.
Yeah, the function room above the pub worked a little bit better in that regard, I think. But yeah, I think if you can get a good location, or if you've got players who are prepared to dress a location, then that can make a big difference.
Well, I was going to say that in a Sabat game that I ran, Jason was playing the Archbishop, and he had a banner made.
Two banners.
Two banners, with Sabat symbols and with the clan symbols on them. And just hanging those up and doing something with the lighting to make it a little bit dimmer actually was incredibly evocative, because people were much more immersed in it. Because if you're standing there in the room in the community centre and somebody's giving a stirring speech about how the Sword of Cain needs to go forth and unleash hell upon the Camarilla, and there's like a Christmas tree in the background that someone couldn't fit in the cupboard, it kind of loses some of it. Whereas when you've actually got the place dressed, because there's people who used to bring along various things that you just leave around and like on a fireplace or something, there'll be like a chalice or a bowl or something, and it added to the trappings of the vampire mythos. Whereas just having bright overhead fluorescent lights on, it's not great. So we've talked about our fondest memories. What about your horror stories? LARPs brought, especially if you're a ref, the worst along sometimes. I'll save mine to the end because as a ref I've got loads. But Jason, you're grimacing.
The problem is I think my one might be the same as your one.
What's it? I've got plenty. Don't worry, you pick the same one as me.
I
I've got
don't
a whole
know.
big box down here.
In all truth, the answer is generally when everything devolved into combat is generally the answer. And I know it's pretty generic, but every time I try and think of a time where I've gone, what was the point? Or why did I bother? It's generally because the entire game has been eaten up by some huge mass combat of some sort. And whether that's, driving down miles to a different game, to find out that we didn't even get introduced into the game because there was a big combat, that kind of stuff. That's where I hated it, I think, the most. And it's just, unfortunately, it seems to be almost inevitable that at some point, usually around 10 o'clock, the big bad guy would turn up and everybody would go, time out, right, we're now in combat rounds, you get 3 steps. And it's like...
Yeah. The
so
10 o'clock monster was never fun.
Yeah, well.
Katana McTrenchcoat has turned up. What are you going to do?
Yeah. And, he's out there slicing tanks in half because he's seen it on the internet. That kind of thing. I don't know. That's generally it. I mean, and it was few and far between, but they were the bits that just kind of destroyed it a bit for me. And
there was, if you remember, Jason, a LARP that we played in something mid-2000s. I'll be careful what I'm saying here so as not to protect the innocent, but it was a Camarilla LARP, and there was some sort of, we used to always joke, there was a certain group of players who liked going on quote-unquote operations because they like to leave the game and go off and use physical disciplines and whatnot. Anyway, there was some baddie vampire doing baddie stuff somewhere. And to try and stop this becoming a horrendous mass combat that dragged most of the game out, Jason and I sat and concocted a plan that essentially involved, why don't we arrange it so that this baddie vampire gets shot up in public and then he can't use his healing powers for fear of breaching the masquerade. And then what we do is we have an ambulance standing by that turns up. We put this guy in the back of the ambulance, we stake him and we drive off with him, job done. And literally the players were there like, nah, we just want to go and storm his haven. Because they were there for the kicking doors down and playing rock, paper, scissors. I think it was at that point I left that game. You persevered a little bit longer with it, Jay. But...
I did, and I remember getting jumped. I got because we were playing I think I was playing one of the Anarch characters at the time, and I'd gone down there and just been a bit obnoxious because you can. And then there's a bunch of them decided to try and jump me outside of Elysium, and I had a guy with me who was kind of my bodyguard, and we got our asses kicked. I was literally down within seconds, and I was on my way out. But he got us out. He grabbed hold of me, got us out, and we escaped. And I remember taking, and actually and I was like, this could be great because all of a sudden I've got these people that I didn't think a huge amount of as role players, and they've just basically screwed up trying to kill somebody who was under the hospitality of the Prince of London, which is not an insubstantial little town. So, I spent the next multiple weeks basically trying to drag these guys through the courts, effectively, of London to get them punished. And it didn't happen. it didn't, and it was so disappointing because it could have been quite an interesting little kind of fight, but it was just denial, and then there was all the, well, you should have been dead. Well, yeah, I wasn't. He got me out. What am I supposed to do? I was unconscious. Don't blame me. Torpor, sorry, not unconscious. Torpor.
Yeah, I'd say I'd echo the thing about the combat, but then we're all very much those type of players where we kind of don't get a lot out of that. The worst part though is if that combat drags a large amount of the player base out of the game. So you turn up, you've got your plans for the evening, you need to speak to X, Y, and Z, and then X, Y, and Z disappear for like hours, and you're left twiddling your thumbs in an empty room, or with in a room with characters that you had no plans to interact with. You can maybe make some small talk, but you've got nothing really going on, and so your whole evening is kind of just screwed. Yeah, that's where it gets difficult. And I'd say on top of that, just I guess lots of conversations around rules and where we can change things or make things better, and a lot of tinkering, which can kind of get in the way a bit, or confuse people. But yeah, I'd say that is absolutely the biggest one. I don't have any personal disappointments, I don't think, from a role-playing perspective in terms of the enjoyment I had. And I don't, it would have been nice to have been Prince for a little bit longer, but, I wasn't a great Prince, so I didn't do it.
No, you weren't. You were rubbish.
I was rubbish. I was rubbish. Yeah. Ventry Princes, terrible.
Awful. Wouldn't be allowed in my day.
I was a brilliant Ventry Prince, and I ended what could have been a mass combat very quickly when the Bruja Primogen stormed down to hit me with his magic sword or whatever he had, and it broke. I was like, detain that man, Sheriff.
But yeah, losing large amounts of the player base to an event, and then being kind of left on the sidelines to twiddle your thumbs is the most frustrating thing for me.
I think the rules thing was absolutely rife, because I've never played in any Mind's Eye Theatre game where the rules, including ones that I ran, where the rules didn't need to be changed in some way. And White Wolf were always fairly honest about the fact the rules, not that they weren't fit for purpose, but it was like, hey, just change these if you don't like them, because they're just there as a framework. There was one particular game, which I think you were alluding to, that was infamous for it, because the ST just could not stick on rules and would change how various things worked it seemed like every 2 games. Or worse, when he would try and beta test rules with one group of players who'd be running on a totally different set of rules from everyone else. And the intent was very good, but the execution was horrible. And just the way the rules were written. I remember, Jason, you and I sitting down before we ran a Sabbat LARP, and we're like, okay, well, what are we gonna bin here? What are we
Most of
change?
it is the answer.
Yeah, because there's just stuff that was just terrible.
I don't. But the weird thing is, all the stuff was terrible. It was the stuff they did to overcomplicate it.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
the whole thing of Rochambeau for your dominate or whatever, it's pretty simple. Everybody understands the rules, and you get a pretty quick outcome. The problem is then when you start, oh yes, exactly like you said, the stupid conversation that, I'm brawny enough to land this punch, I'm nimble enough to that. Nobody played it like that because it just didn't really add anything to it.
Didn't. That's the thing. If it added something, it would be good. It was a bit like named status traits. Pointless. The whole point of having status traits in LARP, as you mentioned earlier, is to say, this person's higher up the tree than me, therefore I have to be careful in how
yes,
I
but
speak
I am
to them.
Cherished and honourable.
Yeah. But I am savage and ruthless, and you're both 2.
Yeah, you're still, and I'm still 1, which means,
Yeah.
And then you get the whole
Get your cherished ass out of here.
then you get the whole Monty Python sketch, don't you? I am upper class. I look down on him.
I found it as a ref, the one aspect of horror stories that we always had, where when people would come to you with character concepts, and these were kind of broken down into 2 horror story classes. One was just the power gamer, who came to you There's one that Jason and I, to this day, it's like a PTSD trigger. A guy who came to us from some rando from some other game that somebody knew came to us. He was like, I want to play this like 8th gen caitiff who's got obtenebration and protean and vicissitude, and his flaw, I've made up a flaw for myself, but I just want to check you guys are cool with it. His flaw is he's so callous, he can't be affected by Dominator presence. No.
As a flaw.
Yeah,
As
it was
a
like
flaw.
a 7-point flaw or something like
Terrible
no.
flaw.
Yeah, it's like, and he never played in a game, which was good. There was someone else who came to us, and for those of you not au fait with vampire, there's a whole big lineage of vampires, and the most powerful ones are called the Antediluvians, who are these monstrous vampires from the mists of time who are apparently all asleep and going to wake up and eat us all. And we genuinely had a player come to us and say, can I play the La Sombra Antediluvian masquerading as a normal guy? No, you can't. There was a time Jason and I gave a big list of, here are the huge amount of clans you can choose from to play in our Sabbat game. So in Vampire, every character belongs to a clan. It's almost like a character class, for lack of a better term. And there was one clan we said, nobody can play these. In the game setting, they have been wiped out. You cannot play them. And predictably, one of the first concepts we got was like, can I play the last one of them who didn't die? Like, we've given you like 20 plus clans to choose from. We've specified one that you cannot play, and that's the one you go for. No champ, you can't. Pick one of the other ones. There was one memory, and this isn't so much a horror story because it still makes me laugh to this day, and it was actually a lot of fun. But we had a player, and she was playing one of the Sabbat's priesthood, and the Sabbat are this quasi-religious fundamentalist sect of vampires who are there to try and stave off the apocalypse. Basically the good guys, but just in a slightly monstrous way. And this particular character came into one game and started talking about some dreams she'd had, and how her dreams were telling her that there was an ancient vampire it was in an island.
In Ireland, yeah, it was. Yeah.
In Ireland, and it was going to wake up and eat us all. And Jason and I, and our friend Anna, who was our other ST, we used to sort of split up character duties between the different STs, and Anna was the one looking after this particular character, and we're like, oh, that's really cool. Did you write that in? And she's looking horrified. She's like, I didn't write anything about that. She's just improvising. Like, all right, well, we'll see where this went. Unfortunately, this proved to be massively persuasive. And before we knew it, she'd got a whole bunch of players together who were all ready to go off to Ireland and hunt down this creature that was going to wake up and kill us all. And he got completely out of hand to the extent that we had to run a game essentially as a dream sequence of what would happen if they went to Ireland. But it ended up they all get eaten by a pack of werewolves.
I was going to say, which we decided was predominantly occupied by Garou. So.
Yeah, bunch of werewolves going to eat you all. And then the other players were like, no, we're not going to Ireland. We've had this nightmare. It's going to be terrible. And she was completely crushed. And afterwards, I was like, why did you come up with this? She was like, I was just panicked and I had to say something. Like, so you completely derailed the game with your nonsense.
But that's the challenge of being an ST, right? And to a degree a player. But as an ST, you don't know what the players are up to all the time. And yeah, just a little thing like that can snowball and become something that you've then got to try and work out, how the hell do we deal with this?
It's a totally different experience running a mech game compared to a normal tabletop game. Like with our vampire game that Steve's talking about at the moment that we're playing, I'll do things like ask the players, right, give me 3 goals for your characters. With what players want to work towards, with a group of 5 players, it's fairly simple to work as much of that as possible into the game as possible, because then everyone's got something they're interested in. They're all, well, I say they're all working together. They're not. They're blatantly, they reach that stage in the vampire game where people are not working together, but that's a different story. But it's very easy to ensure that people have something to do that they're interested in, because you've got 5 players. When you've got close to 30 players,
and then
And
At one point, I'm sure we had. At one point in one York House game, not our game, but I don't know. You might have been a ref still at the time of the original one. There were over 80 players at one session in York House.
Was there?
Yeah, there was. It was insane.
Well, I remember our game, the most we had in our Sabbat LARP was 32.
Yeah.
I think it's between 3 storytellers. That's still a lot.
It's a ridiculous amount, and you've got to try and you said you're asking for a few things that people want to achieve. Now imagine you scale that up to 30 people,
and then when you start writing downtimes, because every LARP game used to always have the concept of downtimes. It was like, what's your character doing between this month and next month? That just became an absolute headache. There was a Sabbat game I ran on my own, and one particular month I counted it afterwards. I'm like, if I'd spent this time writing a novel, I'd actually have written a novel, because I wrote over 400 pages of downtime responses to people. And the thing is, a lot of downtimes were some downtimes were good because they added to the story and they made things go off in different directions, or it was a player exploring what they really wanted to explore for the character. But a lot of the time it was like, I want to go hunting and ensure that I'm on full blood before the next game starts, and I want to do this, and
I want to spend this XP to gain this influence or whatever. Yeah, I hated writing downtimes, as you know, Ian.
It was that was one thing in our game. You could tell if Jason wrote your downtime responses or if me or Anna did it, because me or Anna couldn't help but be verbose and turn it into a little work fiction that Jason's like, you now have influence too. No story as to how you got there. You've just got influence too. Go and have fun with it.
It's not important. It's not important.
Speaking of fond memories, there was an idea that Jason, myself, and Anna came up with one game where, in our Sabbat game, they were reaching a point where the player characters were getting ready to move in another direction, and the Sabbat leadership were going to decide what they were going to do. So we decided, why not write a game where they play the leadership of the Sabbat and then they decide the fates of their characters. So we wrote 30 plus briefs for the Sabbat leadership in Mexico City, gave them out to all the players, and they had a great old time playing these characters, the leaders of the Sabbat, these incredibly powerful vampires. But the funniest thing is, when we were putting the briefs together, we spent a whole weekend coming up with this, and there was quite a lot of alcohol consumed in the process. And we were mapping certain people to certain character types, saying, oh, like Wes would be really good playing this, and well, we can get Sandy to play that. And as we get through this whole list, we were left with one player at the end who we had completely forgot about. And Anna's like, oh, what should we give him? And Jason was maybe a little bit drunk at that time, a little bit belligerent. He says, we give him anything. Give him the cleaner, and he'll still manage to screw it up.
God.
Which, to this guy's credit, we gave him something, and he was one of the best players at the game. Afterwards,
smashed it out of the park.
Maybe you owe him an apology.
Yeah. I haven't given him it yet.
No, it's only been 20 years.
Yeah.
22 years, in fact.
I just want to shout out, because the fact is we've mentioned 2 of these LARPs, okay?
Okay.
And so you've mentioned Hunter and you've mentioned Vampire, okay? But I just want to say, I thought Demon was brilliant and was underrated and had a lot of potential. And it was potentially more political than Hunter, probably even as political as Vampire. That could have been great. And then there was Wraith, and that is an awesome game. Very difficult to do in a LARP situation with the shadow and things like that, but also... And
you and I thought, we'll give that a go. And
we'll give it a go, because we can do this, because we're God's gift to LARP. Clearly not, but never mind.
Yeah, no, we never did that.
No.
Yeah, I'm looking at my bookshelf here, and there's LARP books I've got, including Mage, Werewolf, Kindred of the East, Mummy the Resurrection, and Laws of the Hunt.
Wow, okay.
And Laws of the Hunt, as I found out when doing the history episode for this, Laws of the Hunt got so many revisions. I think it got the same amount of revisions as Vampire. They were just constantly pushing that out there. I have never, ever, in my entire time involved in the LARP scene, heard of a Laws of the Hunt LARP. It's things like the Inquisition or the FBI Special Affairs Division or the Arcanum. Who's running these LARPs that it's so popular that they've had 5 revisions of Laws of the Hunt?
Not you.
Not me. No, I can't even imagine how you would do them. But they got, when they released the Laws of Judgment book, the final book for LARP, the very first section was for Laws of the Hunt. Like they've clearly been running these because it's got a section in the final closing out book ahead of Vampire and Werewolf and all the rest. But clearly somewhere's got a very good FBI Special Affairs Division LARP that's been running for years.
It's a deep state cover, man.
If any of you actually, apart from Hunter and Vampires and Demon, which in fairness was made up on the spot, have any of you played any other Mind Death Theatre games?
I just told you the 4 I did. That was the only ones I did.
No, I never really felt the appeal of like Mage or Werewolf or Changeling for that matter. No, for me, yeah, very much Vampire. Hunter appeals to me more than Vampire, I think, because I just love that concept. But yeah, just those 2 were the ones that really appealed. If someone had invited me to a Werewolf game, would I have gone?
So the weird thing about Werewolf is it appeals to me on the tabletop side, but I just don't think it would work as LARP. And I'm sure there are probably some Werewolf games out there that would absolutely prove me wrong. But again, it goes back to me thinking that whether it's just I've made a massive assumption here that Werewolf is all about, running around ripping things apart and actually can be quite political. Goes back to my social, political structure thing, and that's not what I think is there. And Mage always ended up being superheroes, White Wolf superheroes to me. Not to me, I've hardly ever played it, but what I saw being played was all, you might as well wear your underpants on the outside of your tights and things like that.
I went along to a Mage game once. It was a technocracy game. And in Mage technocracy, they're the quote-unquote bad guys. They're mages who use technological magic because it blends in with modern society. And it was dreadful. Drove all the way to Leicester to play in that, and then drove all the way back and vowed I'm never going to play again because it basically was just Terminator. Half a dozen people like, yeah, we're playing cyborgs with chain guns. Oh, good, this sounds thrilling. And it was as good as you can imagine. I had this concept for this guy whose whole technological thing was manipulating stock markets and global trends. Nope. That was not a good concept for that game. If I was like a 40k Space Marine, it probably would have fitted in a little bit better. But that wasn't to be the LARP for me. There was a Mage game actually in Milton Keynes, wasn't there?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't know what it was like, I didn't go.
No, I didn't go either. Well, on that depressing note, is anyone got any shout-outs actually they want to give before we close? Anything that you've seen that you fancy talking about? Anything you've backed on Kickstarter, Jason, that you fancy talking about?
I've not backed Blade Runner.
I've not either.
And I don't know, part of me's like, I don't know why, because I've backed a lot of stuff recently that quite frankly I know I'm never going to get to play, and Blade Runner should be up there as one of it, and I don't know why, so I apologise to the guys doing it. I probably should have. But, I got the PDF of Cyborg, which is the Merkborg cyberpunk thing, and that looks amazing.
It's so
good looking, and the fact that Rule 0 is no matter what you do, no matter what character you make, never ever trust the corpse, never ever trust the government. They are not your friends, and that's Rule 0. It's not even Rule 1, and I just
similar to Merkborg. It's just artistically amazing.
Yeah.
Just go through the PDF. There's a lot of PDFs I look at and they just don't hold my attention. Like, I want a physical product to hold.
Oh, you just spend time just leafing through it.
It just looks gorgeous.
Yeah,
and it's a great setting, and there's already a ton of third-party material out for it, because that's what I love about the guys that make those games. Like, just make products.
Yeah.
We're good. Just make third-party stuff.
Yeah. There's no necessary. It's really easy to make. There's a third party agreement, isn't there? And there's basically just says mention the third party agreement. Ta-da! That's pretty much all it is.
Don't steal anyone's artwork and use the third party agreement.
Which is kind of just don't be a dick, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, which is pretty good. So that looks really good. And then obviously, I picked up the Dune one ages ago, and I'm still.
You still not run the game for me and Steve that you said you were going to run.
Yeah, what's up with that, Downey?
Yeah, there's lots of things I've probably said I'd run for you guys that I haven't got around to doing.
Like Slay Industries, maybe.
Oh, you still got... You played that, right? You played that?
No, it's not concluded. I'm still missing the final part where we find out how dead Matt is.
He's not... Well, that all does depend on your actions, to be fair. Yeah, Matt's not going to have much of a speaking part in the final part of that, if I'm honest.
Choices and consequences.
Absolutely.
Actually, I had a Kickstarter turn up the other day, the Mouse Ritter box set, which...
I saw you post something about that. I don't even know what that is.
It's incredibly beautiful. It's essentially D&D, but you play mice.
Okay.
Which it's a really odd way to sell it, but the production value is phenomenal. The character sheet they have is incredibly simplistic, but they handle things like inventory with little chits that you put on the sheet, and it's like a dry erase marker you use for various bits and bobs, and it's simple rules. You get 3 stats, and it looks gorgeous. It's won awards, but again, the production values for what's essentially a very small independent game, it just looks incredible.
I'm sure there's some board games that deal with exactly that kind of premise.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a dedication section in it.
Okay.
So it dedicates a whole ton of different things, where clearly mice going down into dungeons and having adventures is a big subgenre that I wasn't aware of until I backed this. There's a game I'm seeing a lot of actually recently, people sharing stuff on, is Death in Space. Have you seen that?
Yeah, that sounds intriguing.
It's very kind of Mothership Alien vibes.
Mothership I've seen, but not Death in Space.
Yeah, same folks make it.
Okay.
Not the same folks as make Mothership. I think it's Free League that publish it.
Okay, worth checking out.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous looking cover. The artwork again looks great.
Mm. And for me, what have I got? I just backed the Gotham City Chronicles Season 3, which I've never actually picked up that game, but I'm like, now's the time because I'm a huge DC Batman nerd, and the minis look beautiful, and I've heard pretty good things about the system, so it'll be another game that'll sit on my shelf and never get played, but isn't that just the way board game Kickstarters are? And then a game that I do want to play at some point is I picked up Iron Sworn Starforged, which is kind of a solo / co-op game. Ooh. That is, I've got the original Iron Sworn. It's very good, and this one's basically kind of like your, in space type of equivalent. And I actually ordered the physical copies of it as well for later this year. But that's it's getting a lot of kudos and good reviews and stuff recently. So those are on my list to do.
I should have the Call of Cthulhu 2nd edition 40th anniversary box set Kickstarter thing turning up soon, which it was back purely for nostalgia value, because that's the first version of Call of Cthulhu I've ever clamped eyes upon, but it's going to look good sitting there on the shelf and never being opened, because
it'll be in immaculate condition when you come to sell it on or something.
Well, when I die and my wife throws it in a pile somewhere, it's going to be
or she sells it for what you told her you bought it for.
Yeah, this thing was $1. Wow,
yeah,
it's a steal.
How much?
Yeah. I've been reading the PDFs for the Terminator Kickstarter that's been coming through.
From the same guys do Slay Industries.
Same guys do Slay Industries. Yeah. And I would say it's a lot better than I thought. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way that I thought it was going to be a bad product, but I backed it because those guys always make good stuff. I think it was more like Terminator, I suppose it'll be okay. But it's actually really interesting, a lot of the directions that they're taking it in, and the sort of games you can run with it, and how you play around with the timeline and what have you.
That's the trick that I'm kind of interested in, because I have the same reservations with the Terminator RPG and the Blade Runner RPG and the Aliens RPG, is what's the longevity, what's the how do you stop it becoming, oh look, there's a xenomorph and now you've got to kill it, okay? And you've already told me a few times that there's lots of effort put into the Aliens RPG about how to run games that are not based around the xenomorph and so forth. So be interested to see what the Nightfall guys have done with Terminator on that respect.
I think with Alien, the interesting thing they've got going is the concept of a cinematic game, which is the one and done game where you play characters and you're pretty much all going to die by the end of it. So you can run it as a Alien movie. Whereas with a long-term, I don't know if they're doing the same with Blade Runner, but with a long-term Blade Runner game, what have you got to do really aside from chasing after replicants or
if you are a replicant, figuring out how long you've got left of your 4 years.
I think it's the same with Terminator, that short of being in the future and fighting hordes of Terminators or going back in the past and stopping the Terminator, changing history, what plot lines do you have? And again, with the Terminator RPG, that it looks like they're doing some interesting things with that, which I won't spoil for people who want to read it. But those are almost my concerns with franchises. Something like Star Wars, I've never had that concern with because it's so open. But when you're confined to almost a single concept, it's trickier to pull that off. I also seen that they're finishing off the latest Slay Industries. They've got the last few pieces of artwork for that Kickstarter.
Collateral, isn't it?
Collateral, yes. So that's going to be a fun read when it arrives, and also a beautiful looking read as well, judging by the artwork that's been shared there.
A couple of non-RPG things. One video game that I've completed. For those people that are extremely dedicated to their gaming and go to the nth degree to find absolutely everything, they would consider me having not completed it. But yeah, I've completed it to my own personal satisfaction, and that's a game called Tunic, which is, I think, only available on the Xbox at the moment, possibly PC as well, not sure. Think of it like a top-down Zelda game, but with some really amazing puzzle elements worked into it. Less of your standard type of puzzles, more stuff that's kind of peel the onion type of puzzles, where you're kind of, everything is in plain sight, but you have no idea until you stumble across things, and then your mind is kind of blown. And it's excellent. It's really, really good. Developed by one person as well, which is even more mind-blowing. The next one, I know we're an RPG podcast here, but I'm going to give you a movie recommendation because I tell everybody to go and see this film. There's a lot of stuff on at the minute, Maverick, Doctor Strange, all this stuff, which is all great, but there is a film that will go under most people's radar called Everything Everywhere All at Once, and it is amazing. Genuinely brilliant film about a Chinese immigrant family in the US, which doesn't sound like the most exciting thing in the world. And the first 15 minutes will have you thinking, why am I watching this film? Why did Wes recommend it? But 15 minutes in, things take a massive right turn, and you will have laughs, you will have innovative action sequences, you will have... I don't want to spoil things, but butt plugs are involved. Yeah, it just goes in a whole other direction.
This is not one of these films you downloaded off the internet because you thought it was a pirated copy of a big film that turned out to be an adult remake.
No, this is one I very much saw in a cinema, and not that kind of cinema either.
On that lovely note, I will leave you gentlemen until we do the next podcast. Wes, thank you for joining us. Always a pleasure up until the end where you ruined everything, as usual.
Yeah, that's the plan.
And that was our Mind's Eye Theatre Roundtable. It was a bit long and rambly, apologies for that, but we hope you enjoyed it. We're a monthly podcast about the history of RPGs, although we've branched out into all sorts of other nonsense like actual plays. You can find us on Facebook by searching for Roll to Save. You can find us on Twitter at SavePodcast. And if you want to email us, you can get us at roll.2.save.pod@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.